You know that kind of rain, the kind that isn't just falling but seems to be throwing itself at the world? That was the soundtrack to my Friday night. It was a relentless, drumming roar against the windows of my 7th-floor apartment, a constant hiss from the wet asphalt below. Inside, though, it was my sanctuary. A single lamp cast a warm, yellow circle of light over my worn-in sofa, the air smelled of the coffee I'd brewed an hour ago, and the city felt a million miles away. It was perfect. Safe. That's the word I'm looking for. I felt completely and utterly safe. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, rattling against my half-empty mug. It was Mom. I smiled and picked it up. "Hey, Mom, everything okay? Nate, sweetie, hi." "Yes, everything's fine." Her voice was a little staticky, the way it always was when she was puttering around in the garage. "I just wanted to let you know, I finally did it. I finally cleaned out the attic." I chuckled. "The great purge of 2023. I'm proud of you. Did you find the Holy Grail up there?" "Something like that," she said, and I could hear the sound of a box being dragged across a concrete floor. "Listen, I found a big box of your old stuff. I mean, really old. I didn't have the heart to throw any of it away, you know how I am. So I packed it up and sent it to you. It should be there any minute now, actually. The guy said he was in your area." "Mom, you didn't have to do that. You could have just asked." "Oh, hush. It's your history. You should have it. Just be prepared for a trip down memory lane. Lots of photos." Just as she said it, the intercom buzzed, a harsh, electric sound that sliced right through the cozy bubble I'd built. I told Mom I had to go, promised to call her tomorrow, and buzzed the delivery guy in. A minute later, a young kid in a drenched raincoat was standing at my door with a large, damp cardboard box that was practically sagging under its own weight. It had "Nate's stuff" scrawled on the side in my dad's familiar, blocky handwriting. I thanked the kid, slid the heavy box inside, and locked the door, engaging the deadbolt with a satisfyingly solid thunk. The rain seemed to get even louder for a moment, as if protesting being shut out. The box sat in my small entryway, smelling faintly of dust, cedar, and something else, something that smelled like time itself. For a while, I just stood there looking at it. All my history, my mom had said. It felt heavier than just a collection of old junk. It felt like a different person's life packed away and sealed with tape. Curiosity finally won. I grabbed a kitchen knife, slit the tape, and folded back the cardboard flaps. The smell of the past hit me full force. On top was my old stuffed bear, Barnaby, one of his button eyes missing. Underneath him was a stack of my favorite Goosebumps books, their covers lurid and fantastic. I pulled one out, The Haunted Mask. I ran my thumb over the crinkled cover, a genuine, uncomplicated smile spreading across my face. I dug deeper. An old Game Boy, thick and gray. A tangle of Pogs. A little trophy from a third-grade spelling bee. Each object was a small, dormant memory waiting to be reawakened. And then I got to the albums. There were at least a dozen of them, thick and heavy, with synthetic leather covers in shades of burgundy, navy blue, and forest green. They were the real treasure chest. I heaved them out and stacked them on the coffee table. Where to even begin? I decided to go in chronological order, picking up the thinnest album, the one with a little plastic frame on the cover that held a faded Polaroid of a baby. I skipped that one, too far back. The next one was thicker, a deep red color. The little paper label on the spine, written in my mom's cursive, read, Nate's 5th birthday in kindergarten, 1999. Perfect. I settled back into the sofa, pulling the warm circle of lamplight closer. I opened the cover. The first page had that distinct, plasticky crinkle as I turned it. There I was, a little kid with a terrible bowl cut and a gap-toothed grin, wearing a paper party hat at a jaunty angle. My dad was standing behind me, his hands on my shoulders, looking so young it almost hurt to see. I spent the next 20 minutes lost in that world, page after page of a life I'd lived but barely remembered in any detail. There were my friends from the neighborhood, faces I hadn't thought of in decades, all of us sticky with cake and ice cream. There was the picture of me failing spectacularly to hit a piñata. The photo of my grandpa asleep in an armchair with a party blower still in his mouth. I was laughing, a real, guttural laugh, the kind you only have when you're alone and completely at ease. The rain against the glass was just white noise now, a distant murmur. I turned another page. This was the main event. The cake. It was a glorious, homemade monstrosity of a chocolate cake, ablaze with 5 cartoon character candles. The photo captured the exact moment before the wish. My cheeks puffed out, my eyes squeezed shut in concentration. My mom and dad were leaning in on either side, their faces glowing with that pure, unfiltered parental love. The whole family was crowded into the backyard behind us. It was a perfect picture of a perfect memory. My eyes scanned the whole scene, soaking it in. The smiling aunts and uncles, the cousins making faces in the back, the green of the lawn, the big oak tree at the edge of the yard, its branches creating deep pockets of shadow against the bright afternoon sun. My gaze drifted into one of those shadows, just behind the hedge that separated our yard from the Petersons next door. And that's when I saw it. At first, it was nothing. A trick of the light, a weird pattern in the foliage. Pareidolia, that's the word for it, right? The brain's tendency to see faces in random patterns. I almost turned the page, but something made me stop. Something made me lean closer, bringing the heavy album just inches from my face. It wasn't a pattern, it was a face. It was pale and indistinct, blurred by the distance and the cheap quality of the disposable camera my dad used. But it was undeniably a human face. A man. He was standing partially hidden behind the trunk of the oak tree, almost completely swallowed by the shade. He wasn't smiling or looking at the party. He was looking directly, unequivocally, at the camera. Or no, that wasn't right. The angle was too perfect. Everyone else was looking at me and the cake. The camera, held by my grandpa, was slightly off to the side to capture the whole scene. This man, he wasn't looking at my grandpa. He was looking past the cake, past my parents, past the 50 other distractions in the yard. His gaze was fixed on the small, 5-year-old boy about to blow out his candles. He was looking right at me. A weird little chill, completely separate from the draft in the old apartment building, skittered up my spine. I kept staring at the blurry shape, trying to make out any features. He was just a man. No hat, maybe dark hair. The expression was impossible to read, but the intensity of the stare was not. It felt deliberate, predatory. I shook my head, a nervous chuckle escaping my lips. "Get a grip, Nate," I muttered to the empty room. It was probably one of my dad's friends from work who'd shown up late and was waiting for a good moment to join. Or a neighbor, Mr. Peterson, maybe? No, this man seemed taller, thinner. And why would he be hiding in the trees, staring like that? It didn't make sense. I tried to force the feeling down. It was nothing. A stranger walking by who happened to glance over at the noise of a kid's birthday party at the exact 100th of a second the shutter clicked. A 1 in a billion coincidence. That's all it was. But I couldn't look away from the photo. The happy, sun-drenched scene was completely contaminated now. All I could see was that pale smudge in the darkness, that silent, unblinking observer. The warmth of the room felt like it was being leached away, sucked out the window into the rain-swept night. The feeling of safety I'd cherished just half an hour ago was starting to fray at the edges, replaced by a tiny, cold knot of something I didn't want to name. My thumb hovered over the edge of the page. I wanted to turn it, to move on, to forget I'd ever seen him. But that would feel like letting him win, somehow, like admitting he'd rattled me. I needed to disprove it. I needed to prove to myself that I was being paranoid, that my adult brain was painting something sinister over a perfectly innocent, random detail from the past. A coincidence. That's all it could be. I pushed the birthday album aside, the red cover seeming to glower at me under the lamplight. My eyes scanned the stack on the table and landed on a navy blue one. The label on this one read, Ocean City, Summer 2001. I was 7, a different time, a different place, hundreds of miles away from that backyard, that oak tree. There was no possible way. I reached for it, my hand slightly unsteady. "It's just a coincidence," I whispered, the words sounding small and foolish in the quiet of the room. "It has to be." My hand was shaking. I know that's a cliché, something you read in cheap thrillers, but my hand was actually, physically shaking as I reached for the navy blue album. The spine was cold, and the fake leather felt slick under my sweaty palm. Ocean City, Summer 2001. 2 years later, a different state, hundreds of miles of asphalt and trees and towns between that backyard and this beach. "It's just a coincidence," I told myself again, the words a silent, desperate chant in my head. A 1 in a billion fluke. You're scaring yourself over nothing, Nate. I pulled the album onto my lap. It felt heavier than the other one. I opened it. The first picture was of me and my dad, both of us buried up to our necks in sand, grinning like idiots at my mom, who was obviously the one holding the camera. I looked so small. My dad looked so happy. It was a good memory. A clean one. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. See? Nothing. I turned the page. Me, holding up some pathetic-looking crab I'd found in a tide pool. Then a shot of my mom, asleep under a big beach umbrella, a book open on her chest. A blurry picture of a seagull stealing a French fry. I felt the knot in my stomach start to loosen. This was fine. This was just a family vacation. The man in the tree was a ghost, a glitch in a single 30-year-old photograph. A figment. Then I turned the page one more time. It was one of those big, wide shots my dad loved to take. He'd stand way back to try and get everything in. The photo captured our little family spot on the beach. Our blue and white striped umbrella, the red cooler, my mom sitting on a towel helping a 7-year-old me put sunscreen on my nose. The Atlantic Ocean stretched out behind us, a brilliant, sparkling blue. The beach was packed that day. It was a sea of people, of families and couples and kids running in every direction. A chaotic, colorful, completely anonymous crowd. My eyes did a quick, frantic scan. The family next to us, laughing. A group of teenagers throwing a frisbee. People waiting in the surf. Everything was normal. Everything was perfect. But I knew what I was looking for now. I wasn't just looking at the picture anymore. I was hunting inside of it. My gaze moved past my family, past the people nearby, and into the deeper part of the crowd, maybe 50 yards back, where the faces started to become less distinct. And there he was. My heart didn't just drop. It seized. It felt like an ice-cold hand had reached right into my chest and squeezed. He was standing near a crowded boardwalk entrance, partially obscured by a woman with big hair holding a giant inflatable donut. He was wearing sunglasses this time, and a loud, garish floral shirt, the kind tourists buy on a whim. He was just another face in the crowd. He should have been completely invisible. But he wasn't, because even through the sunglasses, I could feel it. The angle of his head, the set of his posture. He wasn't looking at the ocean. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was standing perfectly still in a river of moving people, and his whole body was oriented towards our little spot on the sand. Towards me. The stare was the same. That focused, unblinking, predatory intensity. It cut through the 30 other people between us, through the 22 years that had passed, and it found me, sitting right here on my sofa. I slammed the album shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. My breath was coming in short, sharp bursts. No, it couldn't be. It's a different guy. You can't even see his eyes. It's just some random tourist who happened to be looking in your direction. But I knew with a certainty so absolute it made me feel sick. It was him. The same height, the same thin build, the same goddamn posture. 2 years apart, hundreds of miles. There he was. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. The warmth of my apartment was gone. I was cold. So cold. The rain lashing against the window was no longer a comforting sound. It was angry, relentless, trying to get in. The feeling of safety I'd built up around myself didn't just fray. It tore apart, utterly and completely. This next part, I don't remember it as a series of conscious decisions. It was pure, animal panic. I wasn't thinking, I was just reacting. I scrambled off the sofa, my knee knocking against the coffee table hard enough to send a jolt of pain up my leg. I didn't care. I grabbed the stack of remaining albums and just dumped them. They scattered across the hardwood floor with a series of loud, slapping thuds. Burgundy, forest green, black, brown. A whole childhood's worth of memories, now a crime scene I had to investigate. I fell to my knees amidst the wreckage, my hands scrabbling for the next one in the timeline. My fingers felt clumsy, like they didn't belong to me. I found it, a thin, green album. Nate, first day of school, 1999. The same year as the birthday party. Just a few months later. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely open the plastic clasp. The first page. There I was, a tiny kid in a new backpack that was almost as big as I was, standing in front of the brick archway of Northwood Elementary. My mom was holding my hand. I was trying very hard not to cry. My mom had written a little caption underneath in her neat cursive, "My big boy's first day." I stared at myself, at my terrified little face, and then I started scanning the background. The other parents and kids, the crossing guard, the yellow school bus, and behind it all, the black, wrought iron fence that separated the school grounds from the sidewalk. Behind the fence, leaning against a telephone pole, was a man. He was just a silhouette, backlit by the morning sun. A tall, thin shadow. He could have been any parent waiting, any resident of the neighborhood out for a walk. But he wasn't looking at the school. He was looking through the fence. His head was tilted at that same, familiar angle. I brought the photo so close to my face I could smell the old paper and plastic. The shadow was motionless, watching. A sound escaped my throat, a sort of choked gasp. I threw the album down. It slid across the floor and hit the leg of the sofa. This wasn't happening. This had to be a nightmare. I grabbed another one, a thick brown one. Family camping, Bear Creek Park, 2003. I was 9. I remembered that trip. We'd gotten poison ivy. My dad tried to cook a fish on a stick and it fell in the fire. I remembered being happy. I flipped through the pages with a feverish intensity. Me by the tent, my family around the campfire, roasting marshmallows. The pictures were dark, lit only by the flickering firelight. It made everything outside the circle of light a deep, impenetrable black. I was looking for a ghost in the dark. And then I found the one picture my dad took the next morning. It was a shot of me, standing proudly at the edge of the woods, holding up a walking stick I'd found. I was smiling, squinting in the bright morning light filtering through the canopy of leaves. Behind me, the forest was a dense wall of green and brown. Deep shadows dappled sunlight. My eyes scanned the trees behind me. Tree trunk, ferns, another tree trunk, another, wait. I stopped. Behind a thick, ancient-looking pine tree, maybe 40 feet behind where I stood, a sliver of something was visible. A piece of a dark jacket. A pale sliver of a cheek. A single, dark eye, not looking at the camera, but at the little boy with the walking stick. He was using the tree for cover, but a stray beam of sunlight had caught the edge of his face. It was him. Even in that tiny, sun-dappled fragment, I knew that hollow-eyed stare. He had been there, in the woods. I felt like I was going to be sick. The coffee I'd had earlier churned in my stomach. I was in the woods with my family, and he was there, watching from the trees. The last album I picked up was Black. Nate's middle school graduation 2007. A lifetime away from the birthday party. I was 14, awkward, covered in acne, wearing a cheap suit that was too big for me. I tore through the pages, my breath catching in my throat. Pictures on the school lawn with my friends, hugging my mom and dad, holding up my little paper diploma. The last photo in the album was a wide shot of the whole graduating class, all of us sitting on folding chairs set up on the football field, facing the stage. My dad had taken it from the top of the bleachers. You could see the whole scene. The stage, the field of students, the bleachers full of proud parents. And across the street, a 2-story brick building that housed a dentist's office and an accounting firm. My eyes went straight to it, to the second-floor windows. Most were dark, but one of them, the one directly opposite the center of the field, had a faint shape in it. A figure, standing back from the glass, just a smudge in the gloom of the unlit room. It was impossible to make out any details at all. It was just a human-shaped absence of light. But I didn't need details. I knew who it was. I knew he was standing there, in that empty office on a Saturday afternoon, looking down at me. Present for every milestone, the silent, uninvited guest at my life. I let the album fall from my hands. It landed with a soft thud on the pile of my ruined childhood. I just knelt there, on the cold floor, in the middle of it all. The photos were spread out around me like fallen leaves. My birthday, the beach, school, the woods, graduation. My entire life, laid out on the floor. And in every single frame, in the shadows, in the crowds, in the distance, he was there. He was always there. The panic finally subsided, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. This wasn't a series of coincidences. This wasn't paranoia. This was a fact. A man, a complete stranger, had stalked me for my entire childhood. He had pictures. No, he was in the pictures. He'd watched me grow up. He'd followed my family across state lines. He knew where I lived, where I went to school, where I vacationed. He had been a constant, invisible presence in my life, and I never, ever knew. The foundation of my entire past, of every happy memory I thought I had just crumbled into dust. They weren't my memories anymore. They were his, too. I started to tremble, a deep, uncontrollable shudder that ran through my whole body. My teeth chattered. I wrapped my arms around myself, but it did nothing to stop the cold. I was breathing too fast. I could hear it, a ragged, whistling sound in the dead quiet of the room. The only other sound was the storm outside. A question burned in my mind, so loud it felt like a scream. Why? Why me? What did he want? I pushed myself up, my legs unsteady. I felt dizzy. I stumbled towards the sofa, my mind a swirling vortex of fear and confusion. I needed to think. I needed to call my mom. I needed to call the police. What would I even tell them? A man is in my baby pictures? They'd think I was crazy. My gaze drifted from the chaos on my floor towards the window. Towards the source of the drumming rain. It was a reflex, I guess. A need to look at something other than the evidence of my stolen past. I looked out into the black, rain-slicked night, my eyes tracing the gleaming reflections of the streetlights on the wet pavement 7 stories below. The street was empty, it was late, and the storm was keeping everyone inside. I just stood there, staring down at the empty, rain-swept street, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. A lifetime of being watched. A lifetime. Who was he? Was he still out there? After all these years? Was he? My eyes stopped. Down below, across the street. Standing directly under the halo of a flickering orange streetlight. A figure. A man, standing motionless in the downpour. He wasn't hurrying to get out of the rain. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was just standing there, his shoulders slightly hunched against the torrent. His head was tilted up. He was looking right at my building. At my floor, at my window. My blood went cold. That's another one of those phrases, right? My blood went cold, but I swear I could feel it. I felt the warmth drain from my face, from my hands, from my feet, all of it pooling in a sick, sloshing pit in my stomach. Time seemed to stretch and slow down. The drumming of the rain on the glass became a distant, muffled roar, like listening to the ocean from inside a seashell. The only thing that was real, the only thing that mattered in the entire universe, was that shape. That silhouette, standing in the rain. I couldn't make out a face. Not from 7 stories up, not through a sheet of moving water on the window. He was just a suggestion of a man, lean and tall, a smudge of black against the wet, reflective gray of the sidewalk. He could have been anyone. A guy waiting for a ride. Someone who'd had a fight with his girlfriend and was cooling off. A drunk who'd forgotten where he lived. There were 100 rational explanations. My mind, what was left of it, was scrabbling for them, holding them up like flimsy little shields. But the shields were useless. Because of the way he was standing. He wasn't huddled against the rain. He wasn't shifting his weight or looking up and down the street for a taxi. He was planted. His feet were shoulder-width apart, his body perfectly still, a statue carved from shadow. And his head was tilted up at an angle that was so deliberate, so specific, it made my throat close up. He wasn't looking at the building in general. You can tell. I don't know how, but you can. He was looking at my window. There was an invisible line of energy stretching from him, up through the storm, through the glass, and it was hooking right into me. It was the same feeling. The same terrible, predatory focus from the photographs. The feeling of being seen. Of being known. I think I stopped breathing. My lungs just seized. For how long, I don't know. Long enough that when I finally sucked in a breath, it was a loud, ragged gasp that sounded like a sob. I stumbled backwards, away from the window, my heel catching on the edge of the rug. I nearly went down. I flailed, my arms windmilling in the air, and caught my balance on the arm of the sofa. My heart was a wild animal trapped in my ribs, thrashing, trying to break free. He knows where I live. The thought wasn't a whisper. It was a scream that filled the empty space in my head. He followed me from the beach, from the woods, from middle school, and he was here, now, not in a faded 30-year-old photograph. He was outside, right now, in the year 2023. I scrambled away from the window, putting the sofa between me and it, as if a piece of furniture could protect me. I felt exposed, naked. The warm, safe walls of my apartment felt paper thin. I could feel his gaze on me, even through the brick and the drywall. He knew I was in here. He knew I'd seen him. Was this the point? Was this some kind of sick checkmate? I see you seeing me. My brain started to misfire, sending out contradictory commands. Call the police. Don't call the police. Lock the doors. The doors are already locked. Turn off the lights. No, don't. That'll show him you're scared. I started pacing the length of my living room, a 10-foot stretch of hardwood floor that now felt like a cage. My path took me from the edge of the kitchen back to the wall with the bookcase, over and over. I was rubbing my hands over my face, my palms slick with sweat. Okay, think. Just think, Nate. So you call 911. What do you say? The operator picks up. 911, what's your emergency? And I say what? Hi, yes, there's a man. He's standing outside my apartment building. Okay, so far so good. What's he doing, sir? He's just standing there. In the rain. Is he armed? Is he threatening you? No, he's just looking up at my window. I could hear the skepticism in the imaginary operator's voice already. Sir, it's not illegal to stand on a public sidewalk. And then what? What do I say then? No, you don't understand. He's been following me for my whole life. I have proof. What kind of proof, sir? Photographs. My childhood photos. He's in the background of all of them. My 5th birthday party, a trip to the beach, my first day of school. I stopped pacing. The absurdity of it washed over me, a wave of cold, hysterical despair. They would think I was insane. They'd send a car, sure. By the time they got here, he'd be gone. And they'd come up, and I'd be standing here, babbling about photo albums and a man in a tree. They'd look at me with pity. They might even call a psychiatric unit. I'd be the crazy guy who sees stalkers in his baby pictures. The case would be closed before it was even opened. I was completely, utterly alone in this. The rage came then, hot and sudden, a flare of defiance against the fear. Who the fuck was this guy? What right did he have to steal my memories, to make me feel like a prisoner in my own home? To stand down there and terrorize me? The fear didn't go away, but it was joined by this white-hot anger that at least made my limbs feel steady again. I had to see. I had to know if he was still there. I moved slowly this time, not towards the main window, but to the smaller one on the side, the one that looked out at a slightly different angle. I didn't get close. I stood back in the relative darkness of the room, maybe 10 feet from the glass, and peeked around the edge of the curtain. My eyes traced the line of the street, past the parked cars gleaming wetly under the lights, to that one specific spot. Under that one specific, flickering streetlight. He was still there. He hadn't moved an inch. Not a single inch. The rain was coming down harder now, a torrential, wind-driven downpour. It was bouncing off the shoulders of his dark coat. Any normal person would have at least sought the minimal cover of a building's awning. Any normal person would be miserable. But he just stood there, a thing of impossible patience. A predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. He was waiting. But for what? For me to come down? For him to come up? I let the curtain fall back into place. My anger vanished, replaced by a dread so profound it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders, on my chest. This wasn't just some sick game. This was something else, something methodical. He had been a ghost my whole life, a secret observer. But now he had stepped out of the shadows. He was making himself known. Why now? What had changed? The box, the albums. The answer was right there, scattered on my floor. I had been sent the evidence. I had discovered him. It was like I'd finally solved a puzzle he had laid out for me my entire life, and this, him standing outside my window, was the prize. He wasn't just watching me anymore. He was communicating. The message was clear. The game has changed. I'm done hiding. My skin crawled. I felt filthy, violated. Every happy memory I had was tainted. The photo of my dad burying me in the sand? He was there. The picture of me with my dorky middle school diploma? He was there. He was the co-author of my entire life story, and I had never even known his name. And now, the final chapter was beginning, and he was standing right outside the door. I backed away from the window again, moving towards the center of the room, feeling like the most vulnerable creature on earth. The silence in the apartment was suddenly huge. The rain outside was a constant, roaring applause for the horror movie my life had become. My gaze darted around the room, at the familiar objects that no longer offered any comfort. The lamp, the stack of books, the throw blanket on the sofa. They were all just props on a set. I was thinking about the locks on my door. The standard one, the deadbolt. Was the chain on? I couldn't remember. I was halfway to the door to check when a new sound cut through the noise of the storm. It wasn't a loud sound. It was sharp, intrusive, a harsh, mechanical buzzing sound. Beatst. Beatst. It was coming from the coffee table. My eyes snapped towards it. My phone. It was lying face down on the dark wood. The vibration was making it rattle, a frantic, desperate sound. The screen, reflecting off the polished surface of the table, was pulsing with a cold, white light. Someone was calling me. My legs felt like they were made of stone. I couldn't move. I just stared at it, at this link to the outside world that had suddenly become a source of immense terror. My friends knew to text. My mom was asleep. It was almost midnight on a Tuesday. No one would be calling me now. Beatst, beatst. Slowly, as if wading through deep water, I took a step towards it. Then another. My heart hammered against my ribs in time with the vibrations. I reached the coffee table, my hand hovering over the buzzing, shivering device. My gaze was fixed on the pulsating light. I reached out a trembling hand and turned it over. The screen glowed brightly in the dim room, illuminating my own pale, terrified face. And on the screen, in stark white letters, were 2 words. 2 words that made every last drop of blood I had turn to ice. No caller ID. It just sat there on the coffee table, glowing. No caller ID. 2 simple words. I'd probably seen them 100 times before, usually a robocall about my car's extended warranty or some political survey. Something I'd decline without even breaking stride on my way to the kitchen. But this wasn't that. You know how sometimes you can just feel it? When the ordinary rules don't apply anymore. The world had tilted on its axis in the last hour, and this phone, this buzzing, shivering rectangle of glass and metal, was the new focal point of my terror. The vibration against the dark wood was a physical thing, a frantic little earthquake that seemed to be shaking the whole room, or maybe that was just me. Beatst, beatst. It was the sound of a trapped insect, desperate and angry. Each pulse of light on the screen was a heartbeat. His heartbeat? Mine? I couldn't tell the difference anymore. My mind was a pinball machine. Don't answer. Of course you don't answer. It's him. It has to be him. He's down there, on the street, and he's calling you. How? How did he get my number? The thought was so insane, so impossible, that for a second, a tiny sliver of rational thought tried to wedge its way back in. Maybe it's not him. It's a wrong number. A drunk dialing from a bar. It's late on a Tuesday. These things happen. People do stupid things, but the man outside wasn't doing something stupid. He was doing something deliberate. Everything about him screamed purpose. And my gut, that primal, animal part of me that was now fully in control, was screaming that this phone call was part of it. Beatst, beatst. The ringing was relentless. It wasn't going to stop. He knew I was here. He knew I could see the screen. This was a test, a summons. He was no longer content to just be in the background. He was knocking on the front door of my digital life. And if I didn't answer, what then? Would that be better or worse? Would the silence be more terrifying than whatever was waiting for me on the other end of the line? You have to know, the thought surfaced from the chaos, clear and sharp as a shard of glass. I couldn't live in this state of not knowing. I couldn't spend the rest of my night or my life wondering who had called. The fear of the unknown was somehow worse than the fear of the known. At least if I answered, I would have data, a voice, a sound, anything, a piece of the puzzle to hold onto. My legs felt like they were moving through wet cement. I took a step, then another. The floorboards seemed to groan under my weight. My hand, when I reached it out, was shaking so badly I was surprised I could control it at all. My fingers were cold, numb. I hovered them over the screen for a moment that felt like an eternity. The green accept icon pulsed with a friendly, inviting light that felt like the most vicious lie I had ever witnessed. I swiped. The buzzing stopped. The room was plunged back into a silence that felt 100 times deeper than before. I brought the phone to my ear, my knuckles white from how hard I was gripping it. The cold glass felt slick against my sweaty skin. Hello? My voice didn't sound like my own. It was a thin, reedy croak. I swallowed, trying to get some moisture back into my desert-dry throat. I waited. Nothing. Just silence. Not even the faint, fuzzy hiss of an open line. It was a dead, digital void. A vacuum. The only sound was the frantic, wet thumping of my own heart in my ear. A drumbeat for an audience of one. The rain a distant, soft static. I tried again, a little louder this time, trying to inject some authority I absolutely did not feel. Hello? Who is this? The silence stretched on. 1 second, 2, 5. A flicker of something that might have been relief sparked in my chest. A glitch. A butt dial. The phone system messing up. It happened. My God, please just let it be a technical error. Please let me hang up and laugh at how crazy I'm being. I was just about to pull the phone away from my ear, to stab the red end call button and sever this connection for good. My thumb was already moving, and then I heard it. It wasn't loud, but in that absolute, profound silence, it was the clearest thing I had ever heard in my entire life. Chak KK. It was a sound from another time. A sound I knew intimately, though I'd never consciously registered it before. It wasn't a word, it wasn't a breath, it was a noise, a dry, mechanical click, a soft thwack of something delicate snapping open and shut, followed by the faintest, almost imperceptible whirring sigh. It was the sound of a camera shutter. Not a digital one, not the fake click sound effect your iPhone makes. This was real, analog. It was the sound of my father's old Pentax K1000, the one he used for all those birthdays and beach trips. The sound of a physical mechanism, a tiny curtain of metal, opening for a fraction of a second to burn an image onto a strip of celluloid. It was the sound of the photographs. The blood didn't just go cold this time. It turned to slush, to ice, to solid rock in my veins. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. That single, simple sound connected everything. The man in the tree, the man in the crowd, the shadow at the school play, the statue standing in the rain outside my building. And now, this phone call. It all locked into place with the horrifying finality of a jail cell door slamming shut. He wasn't just looking at me. He wasn't just standing there. He was taking my picture. Right now, through the window, probably with a telephoto lens, from across the street. He was standing in the storm, documenting me in my moment of absolute terror. And the most sickening part, the part that made me want to vomit, was that he wanted me to know. This wasn't about staying hidden anymore. This call, this sound, it was a message. It was a handwritten note delivered directly into my brain, and it said, "I'm still here. I see you, and I am still taking what is mine." The line went dead. The call ended without a click or a tone, just a sudden return to the normal home screen. I screamed. It was a choked, pathetic sound, more air than voice. I ripped the phone away from my ear and threw it. I didn't even aim. It hit the plush arm of the sofa with a soft thud and bounced onto the cushions, screen side down. Like it was ashamed, like it was a venomous snake I'd just shaken from my hand. The rage was back, but this time it was different. It wasn't defiant. It was the terrified, cornered rage of an animal. All my attempts at rational thought, at trying to deal with this like a sane adult, were gone. They were a luxury I could no longer afford. He had been a ghost, a creepy story from my past, and I could have maybe, possibly, dealt with that. But he had just reached through time and space and technology to touch me, to prove that the ghost was real, and it was in the room with me. I scrambled towards the window. I wasn't trying to see him anymore. I didn't need to. I could feel him. I could feel his gaze on my back like a physical weight. My only thought, my only primal instinct, was to make it stop. To hide. My hands found the edge of the heavy blackout curtains. I didn't pull them gently. I yanked. I tore at them with all the strength in my body. The metal rings shrieked in protest as they scraped across the rod, a raw, ugly sound that filled the apartment. Fabric billowed and then fell, a wall of thick, dark cloth dropping like a guillotine. The room was plunged into near total darkness, the only light now the faint, ambient glow from the kitchen and the hateful, accusing pulse of my phone's notification light on the sofa. I stood there, panting in the dark, my chest heaving. My back was pressed against the wall next to the window, as I tried to make myself as small as possible. The sound of the rain was muffled now, a distant drumming. I had shut the world out. I had cut off his line of sight. But as I stood there, trembling in my self-imposed darkness, a new, colder thought slithered into my mind. He knows my phone number. He's standing right outside. What else does he know? My brain went blank. For a second, maybe two, there was nothing. No thought, no fear, just a white noise static where my personality used to be. The kind of system shock you get right after a car crash, before the pain kicks in. I was just a body standing in the dark, my back pressed so hard against the dry wall I thought I might phase through it. My own apartment, my home for the last 3 years, had become an alien landscape. A cage. Then the commands started firing off in my head, simple, primal instructions. Lock, secure, hide. I peeled myself off the wall and moved. I wasn't thinking, I was just doing. My legs were shaky but they worked. First, the windows in the living room. I'd already yanked the curtains shut, but I fumbled for the locks at the base of the sash, my fingers sliding on the cool, painted metal. Click, click, a pathetic sound, really, against the kind of threat I was facing, but it was something. It was an action. Then, the small balcony off the kitchen. I barely ever used it. A sliding glass door. I shoved the cheap security bar into the track at the bottom, ramming it into place with my foot. Then I checked the lock on the handle. It was already engaged, but I twisted it back and forth twice, just to be sure. Just to feel the mechanism engage again. The whole time, my head was on a swivel, my ears straining to hear something over the sound of my own ragged breathing and the damn rain. It was still coming down, a steady, endless drumming on the roof and against the glass. It used to be a comforting sound. Now it just felt like it was providing cover. White noise for whatever he was doing out there. Last was the front door. The main event, the final barrier. I stumbled through the darkness of the entryway, my hands out in front of me like a sleepwalker. I reached the door and my fingers found the thumb turn on the main lock, the one built into the doorknob. I twisted it hard. The bolt slid into the frame with a solid, satisfying thunk. A good sound, a final sound. For a split second, a tiny, insane spark of relief went through me. Locked. I'm locked in. I'm safe. It was a lie, and a part of me knew it. In the white-hot panic of seeing the photos, of answering that call, of seeing him standing out there, I had run on pure adrenaline. My higher brain functions had just shut off. And so, I turned away from the door, completely forgetting about the second lock. The deadbolt, the one that required a key from the outside, the one that was my actual, real line of defense. I just forgot. I don't know how else to explain it. My brain registered the thunk of the knob lock and told me the task was complete. Wall secured. Move on. I backed away from the door, moving deeper into the apartment. I didn't turn on any lights. Light was a beacon. It made you a target. The darkness felt safer, like a blanket. I ended up in the living room again, sinking down into the corner farthest from the door and the windows, pulling my knees up to my chest. I sat there on the floor, my cheek pressed against the rough texture of the wall, and I just listened. The world shrank to the size of my apartment, and then it shrank further, to the size of my own head. The only things that existed were the drumming of the rain, a distant siren that wailed and then faded, and the blood pounding in my ears. Thump thump, thump thump. It was so loud I was scared he could hear it, all the way down on the street. My mind started to play tricks on me. Every settling groan of the old building was a footstep in the hall. Every gurgle of the water pipes in the wall was a throat being cleared. I was trying to rationalize. You have to understand, I was trying to get a grip. He's just a creep, a stalker. He gets off on scaring people. He saw me close the curtains. He knows the game is up for tonight. He'll get bored. He'll leave. People like that are cowards, right? They want to stay in the shadows. They feed on the fear, but from a distance. He won't actually do anything. I repeated that to myself, over and over. A mantra. He won't do anything. He won't do anything. And then I heard it. It was so quiet, I absolutely thought I'd imagined it. A sound from the direction of the front door. It wasn't a knock. It wasn't a footstep. It was a tick. A tiny, insignificant noise that was immediately swallowed by the sound of the rain. I held my breath, straining my ears. The thumping in my chest was so violent now it was making my whole body shake. There it was again, scrape, a sickly little sound, a little metal whisper. It was the sound of something thin and hard sliding against something else. The sound of a key that doesn't quite fit, being jiggled in a lock. But this wasn't jiggling, it was more precise than that. It was methodical. My blood didn't just run cold. It evaporated. Every rationalization, every comforting lie I had just told myself, turned to dust. He wasn't on the street. He wasn't in the rain. He was here. He was right outside my door. He was picking the lock. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. My body was screaming at me to do something. Yell, run, grab a knife from the kitchen. But I was frozen solid. A statue made of sheer terror. All I could do was sit there, in the dark, and listen to the sound of my world being pried open. Click, scrape, tick tick tick. It was a delicate, awful little surgery being performed on my front door. He was patient. He knew what he was doing. My mind flashed to the deadbolt, the one I hadn't locked. A wave of nausea so profound it almost made me gag washed over me. I had left the goddamn door unlocked. Not really, but for someone like him? For someone who could do this? I might as well have left it wide open with a welcome mat out front. How long did it last? 10 seconds? A minute? An eternity? I don't know. Time had stopped making sense. There was only the before, when the door was locked, and the after, which was coming any second now. And then it came. TCHAK. It wasn't a loud sound, but in the dead quiet of my apartment, it was a gunshot. A final, hollow, metallic pop. The sound of a mechanism giving up. The sound of a barrier failing. It was the sound of a purpose fulfilled. Silence. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. For one beautiful, horrifying second, nothing happened. And then, I saw the doorknob. It was just a faint silhouette against the sliver of ambient light from the hallway, but I could see it. And it was turning. Down. Slowly. Smoothly. With no hesitation at all. It turned all the way down and stayed there. The door swung inward. It didn't creak. Of course it didn't creak. A man that meticulous wouldn't allow a creaky hinge to announce his presence. It just opened, a silent, growing rectangle of slightly less dark slicing through the absolute dark of my apartment. A figure stepped through. He was tall, or at least, he seemed tall, a long, dark shape that blocked out the hallway light. He slipped inside with an eerie grace, like a phantom, and then he did the thing that shattered the last remaining piece of my sanity. He reached back and gently, silently, pushed the door closed behind him. Click. The latch engaged softly. He wasn't here to grab and run. He wasn't here to burgle. He was here to be in the room with me. He had locked us in together. That was it. The paralysis broke. The ice shattered. The part of the brain that houses reason and civility and fear went dark, and the ancient, animal part took over. The part that only wants to live. It wasn't a decision. It was a reflex. A scream tore out of my throat. It wasn't a word. It was a raw, tearing sound of pure, unadulterated terror. As the sound ripped through the air, my body was already moving. My hand shot out and grabbed the first thing it touched. The lamp on the end table next to me. It was heavy, with a thick ceramic base. I didn't even register its weight. I just had it. I lurched to my feet and threw it with every ounce of strength I had in my body. I threw it at the shape. At the darkness where he stood. The lamp flew through the air, a clumsy, whirling projectile in the pitch black. I didn't see if it hit him. I think it missed. It smashed against the wall just to his left. The sound was explosive, a percussive crack of ceramic shattering, followed by the tinkle and crash of the light bulb and shade hitting the hardwood floor. It was a huge, violent, beautiful noise. And in that exact same instant, another sound erupted, a sound so loud and so alien that it felt like it was splitting the world in two. A high-pitched, piercing, electronic shriek from right outside in the hallway. It was a relentless, punishing wave of noise that drilled directly into my skull. The fire alarm, the noise of the lamp breaking, my own scream, and now this deafening, mechanical wail all crashed together in a single, chaotic moment. In the darkness, the tall shape, which had started to move toward me, froze. He stopped dead, a statue of black against black, caught completely off guard by the sheer, unexpected volume of it all. For a second, there was nothing but the noise. The sound of the world tearing itself apart. My scream, the crash of the lamp, and that piercing, electronic shriek of the fire alarm were all one single, solid thing. It was a physical wall of sound that pressed in from all sides, vibrating in my teeth, in my bones. It scrubbed my brain clean of thought. The dark shape, the man in my apartment, he was just as stunned as I was. In the strobing, hellish red light that now pulsed from the alarm sensor in the hallway, I could see his silhouette jerk back. A single, flinching motion. He hadn't planned for this. The noise wasn't part of his script. You have to understand, a man like that, a man who moves with that kind of silent purpose, he's all about control. He had controlled the photos, the phone call, the lock on my door. This chaos, this screaming alarm, this was a variable he couldn't account for. He stood there for maybe one full pulse of the red light. A frozen statue of a man. In the next pulse, he was moving. But not toward me. He turned with that same eerie, liquid grace he'd used to enter, his long coat swirling around his legs. The front door was still ajar. He didn't run. He didn't scramble. He just exited. He slipped back out into the hallway as quietly as he'd come in. He reached back, his hand a dark shape against the brighter hallway, and he pulled the door toward him. It closed with a soft, final click. And then he was gone. The alarm was still screaming. It was a relentless, punishing sound that didn't care if the threat was gone. It just kept shrieking. I was still standing in the middle of the living room, my arms still half raised from throwing the lamp. My own scream had died in my throat, but my lungs burned. My whole body was shaking, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my gut and radiated out to my fingertips. That's when the banging started. Bam, 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 bam. A frantic, heavy pounding on the door he'd just closed. "Hey, Nom, are you in there? What the hell is going on?" It was Mr. Henderson's voice from next door. Hearing a normal, familiar voice, was like being thrown a rope when you're drowning. It broke the spell. I stumbled forward, my legs feeling like they were filled with wet sand. My hand fumbled with the doorknob, the same one the intruder had turned so smoothly just a minute ago. I yanked the door open. The hallway was a mess of noise and flashing red light and people. Mr. Henderson was there, a retired guy in a bathrobe, his face pale with alarm. Across the hall, the young couple from 3B were peering out, their eyes wide. Down the hall, I could see more doors opening. The alarm, I croaked. My voice was a raw whisper. Someone, that's as far as I got before the building's security guard, a heavy-set guy named Carlos, came jogging up the stairs, his radio crackling. "What's going on here? What was that crash?" he asked, his eyes scanning past me into my dark apartment. "I think someone broke in," I managed to say, the words feeling foreign and stupid in my mouth. It all dissolves into a blur after that. Carlos went in first, flashlight out, sweeping the beam across the room. He confirmed the broken lamp, the general sense of disarray that was entirely my own panicked creation. Someone else, I think it was Henderson, managed to find the source of the alarm, a plume of black smoke pouring from under the door of an apartment down on the second floor. Someone had left a pan on the stove. It was a stupid, mundane accident, but it had saved me. That random act of culinary negligence had saved my life. Eventually, the alarm was silenced. The sudden quiet was almost as shocking as the noise had been. People started shuffling back into their apartments, muttering. Carlos stayed with me. He was a good guy. He looked at my face, at the way I was shaking, and he called the police. So I sat there, on my own sofa, in my violated home, and told the story to two uniformed officers. They were professional, patient, but you could see it in their eyes. The polite skepticism. I told them about the photos. I told them about the man on the street. I told them about the phone call, the sound of the camera shutter. I told them about the lock being picked, the door opening. "So he came in," the older cop said, making a note on his pad. "And you threw a lamp at him?" "Yes. And then the fire alarm went off, and he ran away." "Yes. Did he say anything to you?" "No, nothing." "Did he take anything?" the younger one asked, shining his mag light into the corners of the room as if the intruder might still be hiding behind a houseplant. "No, I don't think so. He wasn't here to steal anything." The older cop stopped writing and looked at me. It was a long, tired look. "Listen, son, we've got a report of a potential stalker. But there's no sign of forced entry on the door. The only thing broken is your lamp." "He picked the lock," I insisted, my voice rising. "I heard him. I forgot to set the deadbolt, just the lock and the knob, and he picked it." "It's possible," he conceded, but his tone said otherwise. "It said you were scared, you imagined things, you heard the fire alarm and panicked." They took my statement. They dusted the doorknob for prints, a perfunctory gesture we all knew would lead nowhere. They told me to install a better deadbolt, maybe a security camera. They gave me a victim services pamphlet and a case number. And then they left. Carlos said he'd keep an extra eye on the floor for the rest of his shift, a kind but ultimately empty promise. Mr. Henderson poked his head back in and asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. I just shook my head, unable to form words. Finally, everyone was gone. I was alone again. The apartment was still and quiet. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was listening. Every shadow was deeper. Every corner was darker. My home. My safe place. It was just a room now, a box with a door that could be opened. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long time, just breathing. The adrenaline had been gone for a while, and now all that was left was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and a cold, crawling dread that was worse than the panic had been. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there. I needed a task. Something normal. Cleaning. Yes. The broken lamp. I went to the kitchen and got a dustpan and a broom. The simple act of walking, of performing a task, felt grounding. I knelt down by the wall where the lamp had shattered. The ceramic base had exploded into 100 white shards. The bulb was a delicate web of broken glass and filament. I started sweeping the larger pieces into the pan. Scrape, clink, scrape. My hand was still shaking a little. I focused on the task, on getting every last piece. I moved closer to the entryway, near the front door, to get the last of the debris. The floorboards there are a little older, a little darker, and as I swept the fine, dust-like particles of glass into the pan, my eyes caught something. It wasn't a piece of the lamp. It was dark, rectangular, and tucked right against the baseboard, almost completely hidden in the shadow of the door jamb. He must have dropped it. When he was startled by the alarm, when he turned to leave, it must have slipped from a pocket. My breath caught in my throat. I put the dustpan down, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs again. I reached out a trembling hand and picked it up. It was a small notebook. A pocket-sized moleskin, maybe. The kind with a black leatherette cover and an elastic band to hold it shut. The corners were soft and worn from years of use, the cover smooth to the touch. It was heavy for its size. For a moment, I just held it. This was a piece of him. A piece of the ghost who had haunted my entire life. Part of me wanted to throw it in the trash, to burn it, to pretend I'd never found it. But I couldn't. I had to know. I slid the old, stretched out elastic band off the cover. I opened it. The pages weren't filled with words. They were filled with drawings. Dozens and dozens of them, all done in pencil. The sheer volume was staggering, but it was the skill that made the air leave my lungs. They were photorealistic, meticulous, obsessive. Every line was perfect, every shadow rendered with an artist's precision. And they were all of me. My blood didn't just run cold, it turned to ice. I flipped a page. There I was, asleep in my bed, face half buried in the pillow, mouth slightly open. The artist had captured the exact way the morning light from the window cut across my cheek. It was a drawing of a moment so private, so unguarded, I felt a wave of nausea. I flipped again. There I was, sitting at this very kitchen counter, drinking coffee, staring blankly at my laptop screen. The reflection of the screen was perfectly rendered in my glasses. Page after page, me watching TV, slumped on the sofa. Me standing in front of the bathroom mirror, shaving, a towel around my waist. Me watering the sad-looking fern on the windowsill. Moments of my life. Mundane, private, unobserved moments, all catalogued with a terrifying, intimate devotion. He hadn't just been watching me from afar. He had been studying me. For how long? From where? How was this even possible? My hands were shaking so hard the pages rattled. I forced myself to keep turning, a sick, desperate need to see it all pulling me forward. I had to get to the end. I finally reached the last drawing in the book. It was on the right-hand page, the left page left starkly blank. The image on it made a low, guttural sound escape my lips. It was a picture of me. Tonight, I was on the floor, in this very living room, sitting with my back against the wall. The album photos were scattered around me on the carpet. My face was turned toward the viewer, toward the artist, and my expression was one of dawning horror. It was the exact moment I'd first realized I was being watched. He had drawn my moment of discovery. Beneath the drawing, there was a single line of text. It wasn't printed, it was written by hand, in a neat, sharp, slightly slanted script that clawed at a deep, buried part of my memory. Finally you noticed, son. It's time we properly meet. I stared at the words, but it was the handwriting that held me paralyzed. The F, with its distinctive loop. The way the T was crossed with a firm, downward slash. I had seen this handwriting before. On birthday cards from a long time ago. On the back of a handful of old photographs. In notes tucked away in a box in my mother's attic. I knew that script better than I knew my own. It was my father's handwriting.